Jared Wheatley, founder of Indigenous Walls Project, founder of Epitage Workwear, Wheatley Construction. He's a veteran. I could go on and on. I truly appreciate you being here, Jared. We love you.
Love you too. Thank you so much, Justin. Yeah, I mean, you like the topic is now. You've got to live in the opportunity that presents itself. It is unfortunate to have lost a family member this week, but you know, I like to think that the love we had for them and that echoes with them where they're at now, with what we call the great mystery. So I appreciate the quick introduction. I'll also try and make my introduction to everyone here as quick as possible and boogie into the details of the Indigenous Walls Project. Like Justin said, I raised two amazing kids in the community. They're 12 and 10. That's kind of my first and foremost priority, is making sure they feel loved and have creative space and feel accepted in life. And so from there, I also operate 3 companies. 2 are much more interesting than the third, but Epitage Workwear, that is kind of an overriding theme that I think resonates through my life. Epitage is, it's actually a slang word it's a derivative of a French word, an épiteur. And what I've kind of defined it as is consciously abrasive, which you can see that I keep a relatively decorated person as I walk around town. So consciously abrasive is kind of a theme of my life, and that runs through the Indigenous Walls Project as well. Our slogan is "For Outsiders by Outsiders," which also runs through the project a little bit. Also, I'm what's known as an urban Indian. So I've never lived on the reservation. I've been enrolled in the Cherokee Nation my entire life, and we've spoke about it in our family. However, like you find with a lot of urban Indians, which 75% of our community are urban dwelling natives, so not defined by the daily interactions on what you might call the reservation, we might call trust land. And so that for outsiders by outsiders, it's interesting that I started with a clothing brand 5 years ago now, and that rides into this theme as well, and part of the overarching strategy of having as many nations involved in the Asheville art movement as possible. And then of course I'm a builder. That's kind of my bread and butter. I grew up in a very working class family. Even now, I'm sitting here in my family's office for a cabinet and countertop shop. You know, we're very action-oriented people. I grew up, you know, getting up very early with my father, and I can remember sitting there thinking it was completely normal to be up at like 5 a.m. and watching him tie his boots and him going through all the details of a construction project with me. And the challenges he was going to face throughout the day. And my mom was very much the same way, always having multiple jobs. So that's a big part of our approach with the project too, is that we're very proactive in our approach. That's how I got to get to the position where I'm painting a lot of these walls myself. You know, for folks who know me, I tell people in fact, I'm maybe too open about it, but I'm not really an artist. I'm much more an activist. I did spend time in the graffiti scene in Anchorage, Alaska. Like Justin said, I served in the Air Force and served up there for 3 years. But part of that action-oriented drive, as soon as the project opened up and we started attaining walls, you know, people who they give you a gift of a wall and they basically want to see immediate action. Whether that's possible or not from an artistic perspective. And that's where I jumped in. You can probably see down there that, yeah, I had to paint some stuff that is very visual right there on Cox Avenue, without much preparation or, you know, I guess I followed my intuition about what would be most powerful to folks and what would be most deep and meaningful to myself, honestly, too, and to my family. So I guess that's kind of the introduction to myself on a personal level. The project itself is very new. I think I painted the first wall 2 months ago, almost exactly today. And that was, the Cherokee syllabary, simply states Cherokee Nation. The idea of the Indigenous Walls Project came out of a collaborative conversation with David Moritz, who is a local private equity real estate investor. He's been investing in and around Asheville for about 8-9 years now. And he's a mentor to me and a business partner. And I talked with him about the opportunity to impact the community. And the word community to me gets tossed around way too much. I hear, and please forgive me, anyone who's listening, Justin, I'm sorry if I step over the line, but you invited me here, so that was your bad. But, people will toss around the word community and they're talking about a bar. Okay. I love you, bartender, working class service members. That's, great. But to me, I didn't drink until I was 30 for the first time. I grew up in the straight edge scene. For folks to talk about having a bar or a nightclub as a community, to me, I thought that was maybe not harnessing a positive enough role for what a community can be. And so David and I were reflecting on what community is, and somehow this shook out the idea that, obviously everyone's on native land. And that's not just like an Asheville thing. It's not a North Carolina thing, a United States thing. Colonialism is far reaching. It sweeps across the world. Right now, we actually have a Peruvian artist painting today in Asheville, and they're painting Quechua. Quechua is a language from the Andes, and the language was actually originally thought to be dead. It wasn't even really written. The Spanish colonialists had done a good enough job exterminating these folks that they truly thought they'd killed the language. It had no original written form. It was tracked through a series of ropes with knots. That's the way they communicated in the Andes. And so in indigenous culture, in our community, we try not to say that languages are extinct or are dying. They could be dormant, they could be inactive, they could be being reclaimed. And so that's what their community has done, has started reclaiming that language and actually developing a written form of their language that resonates in a meaningful way today to their community. And that's what the project is really all about, is giving people space, not myself or anyone else, or excuse me, any one particular person or nation, that space to speak. Yeah, I guess that's the intro to the project. We have about 25,000 square feet of walls. I don't know how to really put that into scale for most people, but that's a tremendous amount of wall space already. We have over a dozen locations right in downtown Asheville that have committed to us. And so right now what we're doing is working with different nations to bring artists in. So we have, we're in communication with people who are Ojibwe, who are Cherokee Nation, like myself, Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and coming from as far away as Seattle, or even we're working to get the visas sorted out to bring an artist in from Quito, Ecuador in August. We've got some live events we're trying to sort out between August and September, which would give folks an opportunity to engage with the artists, see live painting, as well as listen to Indigenous music during that festivity. So that's kind of how we're tracking. I mean, it's 2 months in, so the topic of now is almost comical because most of the time, and I don't know much about the art world because I'm not an artist, but as an activist, I know the very first thing I need to do is take action. And I think in 2 months, we've created a pretty good splash and started a very good dialogue with the community. That's pretty much my spiel to open it up, but I'm very interested to hear what others may have to say, what questions there may be. Justin, I would actually ask you, because you reached out to me. What is it about this project that catches your eye and has kind of brought you in?
It was all you, Jared. No, I was really struck by the impact. There was the impact of what you were doing, and I didn't even know that you were a dual citizen until we started, having these conversations. And I have noticed the orange, one of my first things was noticing is knowing you, there's got to be meaning behind it. And so that would be my question is there a reason other than it being your favorite color or whatever, having predominantly orange and black?
Yeah, I love that. First off, you stimulate a lot of thoughts, and I think this about me. If somebody says one thing, I have 10 other little ADHD synopses that go off. But the first thing I want to say there is I really appreciate you just saying straight up, you didn't know I was a dual citizen. And I think that's a big part of the project, is for folks to understand the diversity of Indigenous communities. I was on down at Katua Mound this last weekend for our celebration, where we have in the Cherokee Nation, we have the Cherokee Nation, which is federally recognized. We have the Katua Band of Cherokee, which is federally recognized, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. So that's 3 nations within what somebody would say Cherokee, right? But there's actually 3 nations there, and there are 500 Indigenous nations in the United States. And I'm down there, and we're in our, everyone's there. And you can see basically everything from Black presenting to redneck presenting Cherokee. And you would never guess if you're just watching Hollywood or you're prototyping or stereotyping in your mind what a Native or Indigenous person looks like, that it's me. It could be literally anyone that you run into. And so that's important. I love you for bringing that up, because that means we're making an impact where you go what is it to be Indigenous? Who is it? And part of why maybe I had been less vocal about it in the past is the complexity of my own relationship with my tribal identity and my family's complexity. My grandpa grew up in the boarding schools in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. He went to Seneca boarding school, which was not even, per the name, it was a Seneca boarding school. As a Cherokee child, he wasn't even supposed to be going there. They brought him in just because they needed to bump their Indian numbers. And sure, yeah, they beat the language out of him. Everything he knew of Cherokee when he showed up, he was speaking Cherokee. You would take a beating for that. And I'll never really know what Grandpa went through at that boarding school, but there are a lot of reports being released even right now about those experiences and that intergenerational trauma that he brought to our family. Of course, Grandpa, we had a hard time with him. He was an alcoholic. He would come in and out of our family. He would treat us pretty rough sometimes. And of course, that's regular. That's
everybody's crying.
Yeah, he's that's an Indian. That's what an Indian looks like. I remember, even in our own community, one of my best friends growing up, he's Lakota, and his grandmother would speak the language in their house and teach him. And he would look at me and he'd be like, Jared, you got some story about some Cherokee, princess grandma, you're no native, and that was integrated into our culture through those boarding schools. That lack of understanding I had of my grandpa's, upbringing, where he was taught to essentially, hate himself and to not like his culture and not want to associate, how that resonates through to our people today. I mean, you can see here, this picture on the right is literally probably going to be the picture of my life. That mural was painted with myself, my kids, and my mom. That's a 3-generation mural that I've never experienced anything emotionally like that, seeing my family on the wall like that and working towards it. And those kids sat on the brink of genocide. My little sister, she's the same blood quantum as me, if you prefer to talk about colonialist tools. She won't enroll in the nation. She won't have anything to do with it. She won't claim any indigenous blood. She's not interested in it. She wants to just be seen as, a white accountant with a nice job and a nice car, and that's that. And that's fine. She has that. But that's what genocide looks like. It doesn't have to be a field of bodies. It can be a field of bodies too. But when you take someone's language away, when you take their pride away, when you don't allow their children to dance in their native dances, that's what genocide is. And that's what this conversation is a lot about. So I know I kind of got off on the side there, but it fills my heart with joy that even if just Justin, know and walk away from this going, Jared's dual citizen. Yeah, I'm a dual citizen. I'm part of 2 nations, not the United States and not just the Cherokee Nation. And as an indigenous person, you live under colonialism. So everyone talks about what's going on in Ukraine, right? Well, I have friends in Ukraine. Like, my friend is in Kyiv right now, sends me videos of his buildings next to him getting blown up, right? He couldn't leave. He's under martial law. And he's like, yeah, the first thing he said is like, Jared, yeah, you Indians know everything about us because these colonialists are trying to come in right now and tell us how our culture is supposed to be. That's what we live in every day in indigenous culture. Every day we're in a colonialist system and we have to bow down to it and kiss its feet. And then we get told we're not doing good enough economically, which is mind-boggling because you take our land, you underinvest for hundreds of years, and then you invest one time and you go like, oh, you should catch up off that one time. So I know I got a little down the activist side more than the art side, but I'll draw it back in. The orange itself, it is a base that I like to use because I'm Cherokee Nation. The Cherokee Nation flag is orange. That's the predominant color of the flag. So when we started the project, we started with black walls, and black walls were cool and interesting and kind of edgy. And I love the way the Cherokee Nation in white pops off the black. A lot of people really said like, ooh, that's super strong and powerful. You need to keep doing that. And then what I kind of recognized is within our community and talking to artists that, folks started to think it was a Cherokee Nation concept or a Cherokee Nation theme versus an indigenous all-inclusive theme. So that's where I kind of pivoted, went towards more like, let's grab walls, let's go orange with them. Orange is a great base. No other colors are like, almost every other color is being used to paint buildings. Like if you paint stuff blue, there's a lot of blue buildings. You paint stuff green, there are green buildings. Orange like that, unless it's that bike shop right there on Ashland. That's the only other orange building I know of. People now, they see the orange and they go like, okay, maybe that's where the Indigenous walls are going. And so we're going to continue to do that for the foreseeable future. I think it's powerful and it's also uplifting, and a lot of Indigenous and Native art is very vibrant. So I think it's very welcoming. Dang, I can't even remember what else you asked me, Justin, but that was a fun little ride. hope you everyone else enjoyed it too.
That was really incredible, Jared. Holy cow. We knew that you were going to be a powerful speaker, and you delivered. You talked about being an action-oriented person, but we really appreciate you also being a reflective person. That really came through and helped us deepen our understanding of this project and your experience. I really appreciated seeing the powerful images and hearing from you. It really helps understand where that power comes from. I loved hearing the detail about the outsiderness, both culturally and artistically, and I think that combines really beautifully. We do have some questions in the chat that I'll read out for you. Erin asks, well, she says she's so inspired by your work and would love to know more about your approach to finding and making the call for Native artists and then pairing them with specific walls, as well as your vision for the longevity and impact of the project.
Nice. Well, thank you, Erin. The biggest thing I'll say is that a lot of folks ask how they can help or engage the project, and it's always about conversation and reach. We've been really lucky to be invited into this space, and we've been very fortunate to have other allies step up and help give the project recognition. So anyone who's on this call, maybe the first step you can do is if you pick two, three, like it really doesn't take that many people, 2 or 3 people to grab one of the articles you've seen, whether it be from the Mountain Express or, you know, I think Visit Cherokee did a piece on us. The Cherokee One Feather is going to do a piece soon. You just grab that piece and send it to 2 or 3 people. That's deep and meaningful to us because it's really hard to always project our voice. Right now, I'm reaching out to artists really on a one-to-one basis. And then also on our website, you can go on the website, indigenouswallsproject.com. And there's a registration for 2 different types of folks. People who have walls, beautiful place to go. You got a wall, you want it painted, you want some messaging there. That's great. Your welcoming environment. Just type in your information, your address. I'll have you logged in. I'll call you up. We'll talk about your wall. The other side of that is the artists. Anyone who, and the bar is very low for me, and I'll tell that to anyone. If you have an Indigenous heritage in any way, whether you understand it deeply and know everything about it and you've tracked it back or not, I'm glad to have the conversation, see what that identity looks like to you, and welcome you into the space and try and find walls. A big thing that I do is walk artists around all the walls and let the wall speak to them. Let them find a place that's deep and meaningful to them. Like the Quechua artist, there's this really awesome alleyway. I can't wait. Someday it's going to be done. Of course, it just started, but it's between 217 and 207 Cox Avenue. That's the refinery building, which is big and blue and has birds all over it. And then the Open Hearts, I think is what it's called, but there's an art space in the other building. It's just a brown building, but it has 4 murals on it of folks that are involved in their community. There's an alleyway right there, and we have all the walls, both sides, up and down of it. And each, like the Quechua artist walked into that space and they felt like they were going to be in an arena. They could see the future of being surrounded by nations right there. And they said, I want to be the first one. So to me, I was a little surprised. A lot of people go directly for high visibility, and they didn't go for high visibility. They said, I want to be in a place where I'm going to be completely surrounded by my community. And that, to me, when they said that, I'm like, dang, I wish I was that insightful. Yeah, so those are the 2 best ways, is to have artists reach out to me. I'll talk to anyone. Everyone knows that. And then I reach out to people directly on Instagram. I approach people. I'll approach at least a dozen people today just to have a conversation and let them know that the space is available for them. As for moving into the future, we've already been invited to go down to Atlanta and paint the, oh, I'm going to say it wrong, but there's like the Beltway or the Greenway where they have a big loop around the city, and the northwest side of Atlanta was all Muskogee and Cherokee land originally, and that's where they would like us to paint. So I'm meeting with their team Sunday this week and going back down. They have a very nice opening happening on the 11th of June. So I'm going to go to that installation opening and we'll start the conversation, but it looks like we'll be painting in Atlanta by the middle of the summer. And I'm in Kansas City right now. I'm meeting with artists here over the next 2 days, and I've got obviously pretty good local connections here. And my family, other parts of my extended family also want to paint now. And so I'll probably be finding walls here in Kansas City on this trip. And other artists in Chicago have reached out to me and they're like, do you think you could get us walls here? So I'll be probably traveling to Chicago to help them speak with developers. So that's the thing is, I would take a postage stamp of wall. If an artist wanted to paint on it, I would find a way to get it for them.
Such a beautiful process of reclamation. I'm so glad to know that it's moving beyond Asheville. We have a question from Allie McGee, who says, you note that this is for outsiders by outsiders. What do you make of the huge interest in the project by so many people? How are you defining outsiders, which is such a rich word and concept?
Oh, really cool. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so the project itself is not for outsiders by outsiders. I'd just like to state that real quick. That's my clothing brand's motto. And so it was interesting to me that that concept has been formulating. It's like you say, outsiders is very powerful, because to prescribe yourself as an outsider is to also ask the question, what is an insider? And so in this case, you know, I've felt, and I know other people in my family have felt detached from our ancestral culture, and that kind of instills that feeling of being an outsider from our own community. In this case too, a lot of the time I reach out to artists, and the artist actually has a much stronger connection with their community than I have, and so I'm, in this case, almost an outsider reaching out to them to provide opportunity. And because of that, I have noticed that there's a degree of skepticism that comes with, you know, my heritage, my ancestry, and why I would be so driven. You know, this project is being personally financed by myself. So when I talk about bringing artists in from Ecuador, that's me breaking open my own billfold and bringing them in, because that's how profound the project is for me. I know that there's a lot of healing going on in my own life with it. And so, yeah, the outside attention that comes, so we'll talk about circles real quick, right? You have like the microcosm of the trust land and the reservation and the community that stayed on the land. That's kind of the tightest circle. Then you have somebody like me who's an urban Indian, and then you have all the allies that surround us, and then you have the regular people who don't care, and then the furthest circle is the people who actually would stand against us if they have the chance. And so, you know, anyone who's an ally, hearing these stories and becoming empowered and thinking about developing walls, that lights my heart up like a Care Bear shooting that heart up into the sky. And then anyone who's a passerby, you know, like this picture at the bottom here, when I painted that Cherokee Nation, I mean, literally within 20 minutes of just getting started, just having the letters like drafted on the wall, a young couple comes by, they have like a 4-year-old kid, and the kid's like, Mom, what's he doing up there? And she's like, I don't know really what he's painting. I'm like, oh, it's the Cherokee syllabary. We're painting Cherokee Nation. And the kid's like, what's a Cherokee? And the mom's like, well, I didn't have to say a word. She stepped in and she's like, look, there were people here before us. They owned all this land. She says this without me prompting it. And that, to me, is the role, in this case, of that kind of outsider that's not they're not an ally. They're not here rooting for us. You know what I mean? But they're aware, and just stimulating that level of awareness and engaging that conversation. I mean, that's super awesome. And then, if I were to take it one step further and to say for outsiders, by outsiders, like, yeah, I think anyone who is struggling with their Indigenous culture, I would love to talk with them. I would love to engage them. I would love to give them wall space to communicate, because I can tell you the feelings that I had, expressing myself in a very public way. It allowed me to reflect on my ancestors in a way that I'll be wrestling with it for years to come. I don't know. Did I answer the question half okay?
That sounded great to me. And we have a lot of comments from folks wanting to support you, wanting to know how they can do that. We do have your links here in the chat. So anyone who wants to reach out to you can do that through those links, I assume. You mentioned the word profound in relationship to your experience with this project, and that feels like the right word for this talk. I'm dripping and sniffing, and just really appreciate it. And frankly, I had a whole spiel about from Creative Mornings about experiencing the now, and I'm just gonna scrap it so we can be fully in what you've given us. And I think we can close. Well, we do have one last question. Do you have time for one last question?
Of course.
Okay.
I'll sit here all day.
All right, sweet. Olivier says, with the walls you're painting, do you envision making a little plaquette or a way for people to discover your culture and other cultures? Yeah, so that there's that impact beyond the visual.
For sure. So I am very lucky to already have made some contacts and allies within the Buncombe County government, and I'll continue to do that. One of the small little side projects that hasn't gotten a lot of attention yet, because it's hard to push it when we're doing all the other stuff too, is, we've started putting the word stop in Cherokee on all the stop signs, particularly in the South Slope. I did an okay job there. You're looking at the guy who put all the stickers up, so I'm trying my best to get coverage. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Especially in Asheville, you've seen that they've started to open up that conversation of the big plaques you see as you walk around town. And there was a big trading route that went right through Broadway. I don't know if we have anything there recognizing that was a big part of the Cherokee region. But yeah, I think permanent installations of those plaques are important. I also think that, if you have the opportunity, anyone has the opportunity to bring the conversation to anyone they know, who may have that kind of, it could be a sign maker, as far as I'm concerned, but just turning each little screw there. If you're interested, probably I'm interested. And the reason is the walls, some of them are permanent, some of them are temporary. One of the big reasons we have such success is that my master's degree is in economic development, so I can speak to private developers and understand their incentives deeply. And so that's where a lot of our walls come from. Some of these projects they think will only last 4 months, some a year. The real answer is getting capital for big projects is difficult. And, they just finally broke ground on that hotel down at that Klingman roundabout intersection. And I've been hearing about that project for 12 years. So, if we could work with the government, if anyone has any allies in that way, we'd love to get plaques up. We'd love to bring more recognition. Drew, I don't know if he's on or not on, or if anyone from his office is on or not on, but Drew Resinger, has done a phenomenal job tracking the land displacement of the Cherokee and other nations throughout Western North Carolina. And so I can't remember what his project, I think his project's called As Long as the Grass Grows, which they used to put back in our treaty. They would say, as long as the grass grows and the river runs, these lands will be yours. And then, of course, 2 years later, they'd come take that exact same land. Drew's done a great job of documenting that, and he's been an awesome ally. So we're looking forward to coordinating with him more. And when he put together his project, there was a lot of public comment that people would like to know more about the history of the region. So short answer, yes.
And Drew did comment with praise for your work. Such an honor to have Drew here. Thank you so much, Jared.